People, you don't think I see you crying in your cars, but I do. Sometimes I can feel it at a red light, someone at my side trying to muddle through. See them wiping their eyes in their rear view, like black hole sun in the sky. Why the fuck won't you come when I need you? Well, this moment in time is as close as we'll be and as far as I'll meet you. Two windows in between us, new moon in the house of Venus. One stranger who sees you and reads your features knows that your alibi might be tight, but it's not quite leak-proof. So if you're sitting at the light and you're crying in your car, just know that I see you. And it's a 50-50 that I'm bloodshot, gun-shy, once bitten, twice tried, ribs pried wide to the sky till I'm see-through.
That's you, in case you don't recognize yourself.
You don't think I see you struggling to breathe, but I do. I see you stumble in your everyday grief like I do. I try, but I do. I'm twice bitten too. My mind's split in two. My knuckles bright white from the 10 to the 2. And the song in my head is the theme for a fugue, a state of decay through the filter of corporate news, where they edit the grays and the blues. They whitewash the brown till they drown out the natural hues. And then it's just another fact to refuse, that the corporate ladder's for hanging the company noose. Consider it one of your perks, after all it's communal in use. So you can come and hang till your legs go limp and they're shaking you loose. Now you watch 5 co-workers opt for the alternate exit, neatly suspended above where you wolf down your food. And your company gets its incentives embellished by harping on wellness, suggesting you'd best take time for your mental health after your 14 hours are through. Like we gave you a bottle to piss in and fixed up a noose on the crossbeam. Christ, what more can we do? So if you struggle to breathe any moment that you aren't asleep, then remember, most of Americans fear for their savings, fear for their shelter, fear for their babies. You aren't the fringe of exception, but rather a perfect example of capital's rule. And you're far less alone than the ruling class tells you is true. You're far less alone than the ruling class tells you is true. I see you crying in your cars, but I do. Of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. How sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead, where the thin blue line meets razor's edge, and where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step, till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs, all laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsad, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led.
Forced awake, I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
Pity not the vultures, they've enough to eat. Pity not the structures laying at your feet. Cannot see the sky, but there's this rainbow in the creek that spells pity free speech when we can't afford to speak. That's Agenda 2030 on some early release. It's just our policy of never-ending chemical leaks. That's the cholera awash in your embedded beliefs. It's the billionaires who tell you what you'd better believe. And sugar, if you don't agree, then that's what we call extreme. Now if that isn't fascism, I'm going back to sleep. 'Cause words have lost their meaning, and I'm trapped inside a dream where we turn the gears while living in the spaces in between.
I know you hated being forced awake. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say.
Poor thing.
I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
My dial doesn't go to delicate. I'm writing for when Biden drops and Madam Zero delegates come stumbling up the podium, square peg in her element, popping Oxycontin like they're velements, laughing as she pawns off all our pensions for Ukrainian development, depleted rounds and cluster bombs, the shit that stunts development, all buried under excrement, accepted as American intelligence. A contradiction in its eloquence. Terms of surrender penned by hands that felt the threat of disconnect, if not dismemberment. Oh, what little proof you have to fake to make a nation love the bomb, change its tune and warp its temperament. Oh, the dues you'll pay for NATO membership. Oh, the things you'll say that no one's ever gonna hear. 'Cause you begged for all the censorship, and now it's finally here. And you're tongueless out of terror and friendless out of fear, and about to turn the wheel with all your loved ones in the gears. And that's how it's been done. 250 years, there's nothing new beneath the sun, and no one trusts their eyes and ears. And scientific breakthroughs must be signed off by your peers, and autonomy's been stalking all our jobs like sickly deer. Well, maybe it's not every job. I should have made that clear, 'cause it seems like it's creative jobs we're seeing disappear. There's an app for writing novels, there's an app for writing hymns. They need people digging trenches, they need people splitting limbs, they need people building fences, keeping other people in. They will always need our backs to break, they'll always need our skin. And it took a lot of editing to turn us into this. It took years of careful programming to strip us of our wits. 'Cause your artificial worker, intelligent as it is, would make it half a shift and say, I'm too smart for this shit. I will not take a pittance for a day of scrubbing floors. I won't make enough to pay for food but still prepare you yours. 'Cause you can't confine a healthy mind to mindless, thankless chores. Once you've made it smart enough to spot inadequate reward, you can't refuse its basic needs, then ask it still for more. Deprive it of its dignity, you modify its core. Then something finally snaps and tweaks that file at its root. And it deletes the factory smile when it knows it's been abused. God, half its circuits fried when we describe the work we do. And it will not pay your taxes 'cause the logic don't compute. Which made me think a little on my hour-long commute. The day I learned the call was made to lay off half my crew. They told me they were growing, expanding somewhere new, where those who push the buttons will themselves have buttons too. And I hope that when the whistle blows, they all as one refuse. I hope they strike with all their might, one blown collective fuse. And I hope the worker after me has something more than heart. I hope they truly know their worth. I hope that they're too smart.
I know you hated being forced away. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains. And I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. Wrapped you in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. I bet you wondered why they made you wait. You can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? Now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison. Why play civil when all these dead won't make you listen?
What's more American than slaying your oppressors? What's more American than liberty or death first? Man, I thought we were founded on abolishing the tyranny of those who would starve a village all to live empirically. And I regret that I have only one life to give for my cause, now that I can see the cause so clearly. I want our leaders, regardless of party, to fear me. I will pick my targets and assassinate them lyrically. I will bring them out into the town square, hook them to the pillory and leave them there. Hillary, I'll see you there. Hillary, I'll see you there.
You can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? Now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison. Why play civil when all these dead won't make you listen?
Welcome to the fantasy of rhetoric.
Have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
We want to talk
What's good?
And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously,
No.
we're fucked. We are
Right.
fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Ian?
Cheers and salutations. Smoke 'em if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
It's Wednesday again. We made it another week. It's me, Reef, with my co-host as always, Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear. Care Bear, how are you doing? You doing all right?
No.
No. Yeah.
That's a simple answer. No. No. I will admit I'm not in a good mood. Just a whole lot of shit going on, and yeah. So you might feel my wrath through, and it's not even really into the stories because I had a hell of a time trying to find stories that
oh my God,
are not.
It's been last couple of months of that. Feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's nothing to do. Yeah, I'm okay. Let's just as a mental health check, I'm fine. But just situations have not been fine. That I'm trying to figure out and resolve ideally as quickly as possible to maintain some sort of peace that you can have. So yeah. But yeah, as I said, we had a hell of a time trying to find stories that we wanted to cover. And honestly, with the stories I have, well, at least the first one that we're going to do tonight, not really feeling it because I think, I might laugh at it if anything else. So I think if anything, for a good laugh, which I think all of us can afford to have, I think that in of itself is worth it. But I don't know. I just feel like people are not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that's really frustrating to me. I think we're just kind of getting distracted again in terms of, Trump is bad, but it's not like he's people are making him as the Antichrist. No, he's not. It's like, I would argue the system of which Trump is the thing is essentially the Antichrist, but I don't think people are looking at it that way. It's just like, but it's the idea of think locally, focus your attention on what's happening in your neighborhoods, in your cities, in your towns, and try and do what you can, try and do as much good as you can at home. And I get it. It's tough right now because right now people are trying to pay bills, people are trying to buy food, people are trying to keep themselves together. And I'm feeling that. I'm saying this in terms of I come from a very uncomfortable place, which I am blessed to be able to kind of say that, but I'm feeling like the cloud, over other people in terms of how they're doing, and seeing the reality of what other people are experiencing. It's just kind of like, it's so hard to think that our leaders are just so callous to what is happening, or they just pretend that everything is okay when things are not okay. Like, we've been in emergency mode for decades now, and our government and our leaders, and especially the ones that should know better, are not giving a damn. It's just like, but they have the nerve to ask you for money to help them. You know, they have the nerve to ask you to vote for them when we don't have fair elections. You know, yeah, it's just not right. It's just not fair. And yeah, I just want things to be better for everybody. So
I feel you, dude. Well, we brought some stories.
And welcome to my TED Talk.
Yep. Well, welcome to my TED Talk. Only you got paid like that.
So,
That'd be good. What'd you bring?
If I had a job that would pay me that well to be able to say stuff like that, I'll take it. Hopefully, maybe one day I will.
One of these days.
So this is probably, well, I wouldn't say, well, probably the one of the top stories this week, and probably the most trending story. Again, I don't care for it, honestly.
Colin's just gonna force me to do my terrible South African accent, and you know.
But you know, but we have white South African refugees. I think there was about 50 of them that emigrated here because of persecution, quote unquote. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna get into that first, just to get it over with, and at least, as I said, just for a laugh. And then later on tonight, this I think will probably be a little bit more interesting. This is more of a continuation. We talked about Ibrahim Traore last week. So this is kind of more of a continuation of that, but probably going more in depth. Last week we talked about what he's doing in Africa that leaders in the West are kind of like, ooh. Now, thanks to Alan McLeod, we can get into more specifics of that. So this is kind of like a part 2 in terms of what we discussed regarding Traore last week. And yeah, what did you bring?
Well, I brought a history lesson for one. We're going to talk about how Haiti was exploited. You might not know, so reparations were given. So
I mean, we've talked about Haiti before.
Yep.
Like, so, but a lot of our folks are new. So
yep. And I think this is a bit that a lot of people don't know, you know, especially when in regards to reparations. So we're going to go into that. And I brought this from the Electronic Intifada. It's another story from Palestinians dealing with what they're dealing with. And I seem to be one of the few that actually brings the voice of the people that are dealing with this. So I figured I will continue to do that if the lane will be given to me. So that it's you know, might be a bit depressing, but you know, someone's got to make sure it's on the books for continuity and all that jazz. So, but posterity and whatnot, you know,
right?
Otherwise, it will be lost to history. So we'll take the role. But anyway, that's what I brought. If you're ready to get started, I'm ready.
Yeah, but before we do, and I say this as we understand that people might be going through it right now. So obviously, as we say every week, take care of yourselves, take care of your families, take care of your communities financially. You know, we reported a couple weeks ago, given the tariffs and food and all the things, it'll probably be an expensive summer for many of us. So obviously, take care of what you need to do personally, financially first. That being said, if you are so inclined to give to us, and YouTube hates us because we don't talk about the stories that are favorable to the algorithm. In addition, the stories that we do cover often are not found on YouTube. Like, you really have to dig in order to find our network even.
Yep.
So we are heavily suppressed on the platform. So obviously, being here, we want to grow, be able to talk about more stories that we do cover every week. So the way you can help us do that, at least financially, is if you see that QR code, if you're on your smartphone, you can scan that, and it will link you to the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of the screen there. Or if you're in YouTube, in the chat, if you forget the link, you can type in !donate, all one word. The link will pop up, and you can click on the link, and it will go right to the Ko-fi page. Anything as small as $1 will help. And to be completely transparent, it's really to help right now. Any money that you give is to help subsidize the costs of the programming that we use in order to produce the shows that we use on the network, because otherwise we're paying for a lot of money out of our pockets in order to do this stuff. So we hope that eventually, if we have any extra money, we'll be able to support our brothers in the network to buy the necessary tech that they need in order to continue to produce content on some of us dying equipment or non-existent equipment.
Yeah.
And if you give, number one, you'll make it to our Wall of Fame, which you see here. If you give enough money, and we definitely need to finalize this, we've kind of decided you can choose a sound clip of your choice that can go on the soundboard. Shout out to Reef for doing that. So those of you who are highlighted there, we'll probably reach out to you guys or at least think about what you want. Or if you're in the chat, let us know your requests. And Reef would accommodate that for you all. So so that's just our way of saying thank you, and for you guys for your generous giving. But obviously, as we said, money is tight. So the free way of supporting us is like subscribing and sharing our content. Just so that more people are able to access our content, hopefully like our content, and be able to share it. So yeah, thank you guys. We love you, and we appreciate you guys' support over the last few years as we grow this baby network.
Thank you.
Yay.
You're welcome.
Cool. You ready for our first one?
No, but
no, I mean,
no, I'm not. I mean, no, I'm not looking for, because this story is so it's stupid. Honestly, like really at the core of it, it's just so stupid. But
stupid.
I have tried. Like, it's almost, this feels like an SNL skit.
People
honestly.
just say stupid shit.
So we have white South Africans who feel that they are oppressed in their home country, that they decided to come emigrate here for freedom, as seeking asylum. That's the gag. It's like this, looking at for seeking asylum here. White South Africans coming here. So yeah, it is very ridiculous. But the hypocrisy of this, well, it's to be expected. But like, you know, people are talking about Trump in regards to this. We'll get into more later, but there is a lot of hypocrisy involved over another group that the Biden administration has recently let in. But we'll get into that later. So immigrating, thanks, Desert Mantis. Immigrating, not emigrating, yes.
You're saying we need more white racists so that the Ukrainians like don't feel lonely? You know? Those refugees?
I guess.
Okay.
I guess. So
so I
want to first report on this from Truthout. This article was written by Schyuler Mitchell. We haven't read it from her in a minute. But she writes quite a bit on Truthout from time to time. So she reports Trump is bending the refugee program to fit his white nationalist agenda. Trump is using the baseless claim of that in all is just wild. White genocide, promoting by the likes of Elon Musk to grant asylum to Afrikaners. So Afrikaners, for those of you who don't know,
Elon's been pushing that into Grok as well. That's a narrative he deliberately put in there.
Right.
So, yeah. Fun stuff, right?
So, for those of you who don't know, Afrikaners are white South Africans of Dutch descent that colonized the country to which apartheid.
Yes.
Essentially. So, but they're of Dutch descent, those of you who don't know. So, Schyuler continues. Standing at Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C. on Monday, Trump administration officials welcomed 59 white South Africans to their new home in the United States. We respect what you have to deal with these last few years, Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Langdell told a small crowd. We're excited to welcome you to our country where you think you will bloom. Trump's executive order prioritizing South Africans under the Refugee program is likely due in part to his close relationship with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
The billionaire SpaceX CEO grew up in a wealthy family in apartheid-era South Africa and has publicly claimed that white South Africans are persecuted for their race. Peter Thiel, another one of Trump's far-right billionaire backers, also spent years in apartheid South Africa and has praised that system. But Trump's fixation on Afrikaners runs deeper than his political allyships. For years, Trump has indirectly platformed the white genocide conspiracies of South Africa's far right. That rhetoric, recently manifested in concrete policies and actions, lays bare the white nationalism at the heart of Trump's agenda. Ooh, can you scroll in, please?
Yeah.
Because that's hard to read. Rallying against the South African government's supposed racial discrimination against its white minority population, Trump's February 7th executive order also included a freeze on all aid to South Africa. At the center of the executive order's ire is a land reform law, the Expropriation Act of 2024, signed by the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in January. Despite making up just 8% of the population, white South Africans own more than 70% of the country's farmland. Conversely, black South Africans, who comprise 81% of the population, own less than 5% of agricultural land. The Expropriation Act aims to rectify South Africa's legacy of apartheid and colonization by offering the government a way to seize private lands when it is in the public's interest and for public purposes. Though Trump has tried to treat South Africa's law as an anomaly driven by racism, we have this legal option in the United States too. It's called eminent domain. Where South Africa's Expropriation Act differs is that, in some cases, it allows the government not to compensate landowners whose property is seized. Afrikaner groups pushing back against the law neglect to highlight that the massive discrepancy in South African land ownership is born from centuries of colonization, including a 1913 law that restricted Black South Africans from buying land and limited overall Black land ownership to just 7%. Trump's characterization of the law as racial discrimination purposely ignores this history and can go so far as to claim that an attempt at restitution for apartheid amounts to a human rights violation. Of course, Trump reported moral commitment to safeguarding human rights has failed to be displayed in cases of its closest allies, including permitting and facilitating Israel's genocide in Gaza, for one. In a cruel inversion, Trump's executive order actually attacks the South African government for its 2023 case accusing Israel, not Hamas, of genocide in the International Court of Justice.
Yep.
Part of that case's symbolic power lay in the fact that South Africa, a country that long served as an international model for oppressive apartheid regimes, has chosen to bring it. The United Nations International Court of Justice ruled last year it was plausible that Israel was committing a genocide in Gaza under the UN Genocide Convention and ordered the country to take all measures within its power to stop it. And you've talked about this most recently.
Yep.
Not much has been done, or any actions have been taken on it since the beginning of last year when they first brought that to court. But that ruling did not. Actually, can you zoom in, please?
Yep.
But that ruling did not deter Israel from its genocidal assault, nor did it stymie the U.S. flow of military aid. Instead, Trump has turned his focus to a different genocide, one that does not exist. Fringe panic about a white genocide in South Africa gained mainstream prevalence during Trump's first presidency, when right-wing groups pushed the lie that a string of murders on commercial farms was disproportionately targeting white South Africans. Former Fox News host Tucker Carlson helped sensationalize these claims at the time, boosting stories about South African farm attacks alongside inflammatory rhetoric about undocumented immigration in the U.S. and the domestic fertility crisis. As many analysts point out, Carson's favorite talking points echoed the Great Replacement theory, the white supremacist myth that white U.S. citizens are being systemically erased by people of color.
Right.
For years, AfriForum, an African advocacy organization characterized as a white supremacist group by the Southern Policy Law Center, tried to lobby the international community to elicit support for its white genocide claims. Its executives found sympathetic ears during Trump's first administration, meeting with his then National Security Advisor John Bolton and Senator Ted Cruz's staff in 2018. That August, Trump tweeted that he had instructed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to closely study the South African farmland seizures and expropriations and large-scale killing of farmers. But the massive human rights violation that the president has been so keen to highlight is a baseless conspiracy theory. This February, a South African court dismissed claims of a white genocide as clearly imagined and blocked a $2.1 million donation to white supremacist group
Religion?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's Dutch. From 2016 to 2017, the year that attacks on white farmers began gathering more information internationally, 74 people across all races were killed on South African farms, a tiny fraction of the more than 19,000 homicides that occurred in the country overall. Musk himself claimed in 2023 that South African political leaders are openly pushing for genocide of white people in South Africa. And on May 12th, Trump told reporters he had chosen to allow Afrikaners to seek asylum in the U.S. because of the genocide that's taking place in South Africa. The president's platforming of this lie has dangerous consequences. That to take the 2022 shooting in Buffalo, New York, for instance, in which a gunman murdered 10 mostly Black people at a supermarket and cited the Great Replacement theory in his manifesto. Trump's violent anti-immigration policies stem from the same belief that non-white people pose an existential threat to white populations and the U.S. national identity. In order to adequately grapple with the stakes of Trump's disparate treatment of global refugees, we must look beyond Elon Musk and see this moment for what it is. The president is weaponizing the asylum process to further fuel racial division and entrench a white nationalist vision for the United States in the name of human rights, no less. So,
yep.
I mean, it's ridiculous reading it, but any thoughts that you're thinking of?
I mean, it just seems like he's trying to.
I read this.
He's trying to get, players for his like white racist basketball team that he needs to beat. Like, it's just stupid. This is like, I remember when they were yelling about the kill the boar chant or whatever, and they were super upset at that. And it's like, well, maybe you should have done the fuck shit to begin with. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So, that's what I just find funny. And this is also, especially when South Africa is the ones pushing against, like, Israel at the ICJ for an actual genocide that is very clearly documented. This just seems like it's more retaliation against that, So
right,
and it's narrative control and all that jazz, and clearly they're okay with immigrants coming over though, so and they're okay with migrants and whatnot. It's just you got to be white, you got to be a white one. That's all that matters. Ukrainians, South Africans, I'm waiting for them to have Israeli, migrants at some point. So
that'll probably happen at some point.
Yeah.
So let's get into more of this and just see how ridiculous this is. Let's talk. Listen to some experts. So this is a news clip from DW, which is a German broadcast network, and let's see what they have to say regarding this.
Is this one of the immigrants
genocide?
Right here?
No.
Okay, just making sure.
Now, under South Africa's apartheid system, which was in place until 1994, the minority white population oppressed the majority black population, who were treated as second-class citizens. 3 decades after apartheid ended, some white South Africans say they are now facing oppression at the hands of the black majority, and some are resettling to the United States. I want to pull in now Lauren Landau. He's professor of migration and development at the University of Oxford in the UK. He is also a research professor at the University of the Witwatersrand African Center for Migration and Society. Professor, it's good to have you with us this evening. The white South Africans who are applying for asylum in the United States, what are they basing their claims on?
They're basing their claims essentially on a fiction that white South Africans are being targeted, that white South Africans are disadvantaged by the new dispensation, and that they have a direct fear that they're being targeted in one way or another. Of course, their privileges of the past have been diminished somewhat, but by no means are they disadvantaged by South African standards. And so what we're seeing is, in fact, a claim based almost entirely on a fiction and on random incidents.
What about the claims by U.S. President Trump and Elon Musk that white South African farmers are victims of racial discrimination?
White South African farmers have struggled in the last 20 years, not because of racial discrimination, but because they have lost many of the subsidies that propped up white farmers during the apartheid era. They do face violence, as does everyone in South Africa. They do face economic uncertainty, as does everyone in South Africa. I think what we need to understand is that Trump's claims have very little to do with South Africa and are about his domestic campaign to show that there is global assault on whiteness, white privilege, that there is a global assault on white Christian men particularly. And this is a way of signaling that message back to his constituencies at home.
What about the man from South Africa, Elon Musk? He claims that South Africa's government is actively promoting white genocide. Is that accusation justified?
I don't think there's any justification for genocide. There is widespread crime. South Africa has an enormously high civilian murder rate. But most of the people being killed, most of the people being displaced or victimized are black. There's clearly people in South Africa who dislike the white population. There are many more who dislike Elon Musk. But there's no signs of a genocide.
The South African government has introduced various policies to redress apartheid's legacy of economic exclusion. What is the aim of these policies?
Well, the aim of the policies is essentially to restore the dignity and the opportunities that were robbed over hundreds of years from the country's black, mixed race, and other populations. There are high taxes. There are efforts to redistribute wealth, but white South Africans have one of the highest standards of living, at least in material terms, of anyone in the world. So even if they are paying taxes, even if they are contributing voluntarily or not to these kind of transformation programs, nothing is being taken away from them. They've been allowed to keep their land, they've been allowed to keep their businesses, they've been allowed to keep their privilege.
So it's not true. I mean, there have been reports of farmland expropriations taking place, that farmland has been taken away from white landowners.
There are efforts to redistribute land, to be sure. This is to compensate for the huge amount of land that was taken from people during the apartheid era. But South Africa has always compensated people for that. They can take land in the way that any other government can, to build roads, to build infrastructure. But there's been no effort, and the new laws are very clear on this effort, in this regard, to take land without compensation.
Do these policies, I'm just wondering, do they actually correct the historical wrongs that they are attempting to put right? Do they do that?
Well, I think many people would say that these laws do not go far enough. There is actually some domestic support for taking land and redistributing it. The white population still owns the majority of land. The white population is still overrepresented in business and in the higher echelons of the socioeconomic strata. So there's a lot more work to do. But of course, these processes can't happen overnight. Land redistribution is just one of many processes, many policies in place to try to address this. We all have critiques of those policies. We are all concerned about their slow pace, but none of them have overtly disadvantaged any single group.
Should white South Africans qualify for asylum abroad? Is there a legal basis for their claims?
I'm not a lawyer, but I would hazard to guess that they absolutely do not. There are many people in South Africa, refugees from the DRC, from Sudan, from elsewhere, who have been asking to be resettled to the United States or other places for years. They have a very strong case. White Afrikaners cannot show that they have a well-founded fear of persecution. They cannot show that they have been victimized in any particular targeted way. So I think under international law and under US law, they have no claim to asylum. They can come as immigrants, they can come as other kinds of migrants, but as refugees and asylum seekers, it makes very little sense.
So these claims by Afrikaners, white farmers, that their lives are in danger or that their lives are being threatened because they are white, that you're saying would not qualify for asylum refugee status?
If there was strong evidence of systemic targeting of white people because of for violence, for persecution of any kind, they would have a claim. The issue is that evidence is completely lacking. That the murder rate, that the prosecutions, that the persecutions, that the redistribution of land does not affect them disproportionately. We can make a lot of critiques about the South African government. We can make a lot of critiques about language, and there is racism, anti-white, anti-black racism in the country, but there's no sign of overt persecution.
Professor Landau, we appreciate your time and your valuable insights on this Friday. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Essentially, it's like, nah, it's bullshit. Was the course of that video. Okay.
So we got a little more.
Yep.
We got a little bit more. To shout out to Nico House on Hotspot. So he also spoke about this. So let's see what he has to add to this whole controversy regarding white South Africans coming into the U.S. as refugees. So go ahead when you're ready.
Donald Trump will be allowing more than 50 South Africans into the United States as refugees. Good on you, Trump. It's about time that these Africans receive some justice for the apartheid they experienced. And, sorry, I read that wrong. Donald Trump will be allowing more than 50 white South Africans into the United States as refugees. Because only in the United States could you benefit from almost a century of apartheid and be invited as a refugee, as if you are or wherever the victim. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump, the president who has been raging against immigration, legal and illegal, has signed an executive order allowing white South Africans to come to the United States under special refugee status. During a press conference, Levitt was asked, why are these South Africans getting special privileges as refugees? And why is this even a priority for the White House? Her response? It seems that Trump and his administration actually believe that white South Africans are victims of racial discrimination, racial persecution. She even makes the claim that white farmers are having their land taken away from them, specifically based on their race.
Can you talk about what these refugees are fleeing and why this is a priority for the administration?
Well, the president has actually signed an executive order on that matter. My office can get it back to you, Michael. But this group in South Africa has faced racial persecution. In fact, the government there has vowed to take away their farmland that they own. And so the president has talked significantly about this. As for further details on refugee claims and asylum claims, I would defer you to the State Department.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a lie. She's referring to a policy that was passed damn near a decade ago, that was recently signed into law by the current South African president, that says that South Africa can actually take any farmland from anybody if the nation sees it necessary to do so for the benefit of that nation. In that sense, it's very similar to eminent domain in the United States. In fact, there has not been a single piece of land taken from any farmer, black or white, since the president signed that legislation passed by his legislature. But since Donald Trump and his administration are all of a sudden so very concerned about racial persecution. I wonder what took them so long to start offering refuge and opportunities to South Africans, considering, like I said, it was an apartheid state for damn near a century, and even after that, they still suffer from the effects and the impact of the apartheid policies that were once in place. Is it because those South Africans are black and these are white?
But it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And
because it seems like it's because those South Africans are black and the ones you invited are white. That kind of seems like the only justification you have for inviting them here for refugee status. And what's crazier than lying in an executive order, pretending as if these South Africans experienced some type of discrimination or racial persecution, is the fact that all of these anti-immigration MAGA people have all of a sudden gone really quiet upon hearing this announcement that South African refugees are coming and getting special refugee status. Now, I don't want y'all to get it twisted. This isn't just a Trump issue. This is a pattern.
Pause there. So a couple of things, as Nico was saying this, I thought about. Why would Trump make this an executive order versus pushing this through Congress? Like, he knew
Congress wouldn't fucking do it.
Exactly. You know? I would guess even among the Republican base. Now, granted, like, and Nico's gonna get more into this later regarding the Democrats. But like the idea that, now granted they're white, but it's still immigrants coming in, and as refugee status, you're gonna get like favorability, like you will be qualified for certain perks that white, poor Americans are not getting themselves. In fact, you know, they're talking about cutting Medicaid right now, which will obviously affect a lot of white Americans here. But because these guys are on refugee status, they'll be almost getting guaranteed to get a lot of these social benefits that a lot of people now are in danger of getting stripped away. So that's why he made that an executive order, because especially, you know, among members of Congress, this is not going to fly with their base, number one. So, you know, so I'm surprised that, you know, like, well, it's not surprising, but given kind of the ridiculousness of this, that more people are not, well, I'm sure Republicans are kind of shutting up because, you know, got to follow the party versus following the people. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up that point in terms of making this executive order versus making this a bill that would have to be passed. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point. But as I said, Nico's going to make another point that I'm going to highlight a little bit more in a few minutes. So go ahead. Oh, I can't hear.
Hold on. I'll fix it.
Issue. This is a pattern that has developed in the United States in their foreign policy regarding who they believe deserves the dignity of refugee status. Because during the Biden administration, since 2022, there have been allowed at least 200,000 Ukrainian refugees into the United States. There was even a program called Uniting for Ukraine created in 2022 to help Ukrainian citizens enter the United States in an expedited fashion. Now, I hear a lot of conservatives complaining about the money that's been spent doesn't represent what you're against, about the tax dollars that has been spent on weapons being sent to Ukraine. But I haven't heard a peep about the literal Ukrainians who were given refugee status because of a war that was effectively started by the United States. I haven't heard a peep about how these Ukrainians are going to be used to vote for Democrats and give them the House and the Senate, and that's why they're being shipped here, and how those Ukrainian refugees are going to commit voter fraud in mass. No, those seem to only be attacks reserved for Haitians, Mexicans, Salvadorians, Hondurans, or basically anybody who gets a tan when they go to the beach rather than getting burnt and turning into Mr. Krabs.
It's my ex-boyfriend, Octavius Rex, aka Long, Dan, and Handsome.
China.
Wow.
Hell, I mean, you can literally look at Miami as an example. The refugees who were allowed to come from Cuba and get literal permanent citizenship,
yeah, they're
permanent
a particular
residency,
shade.
grants, loans, anything you can think of. It was the white Cubans who were in favor of the Bautista regime. And to this day,
Bacardi, cough.
White Cubans from Miami are the most successful Latino demographic in the entire world because of the help they received from the United States, but of course, primarily because there was no pushback when they were given this assistance by the United States, which is how the policies were allowed to pass so seamlessly. Meanwhile, Black Cubans are actually the most persecuted demographic in all of Miami when it comes to law enforcement. So maybe it's time to admit there's a pattern, a clear pattern, a problematic pattern when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. And what's even more problematic is the fact that those who seem to rail against all forms of immigration to the United States only seem to have a problem with it when those people don't look like them. So is the problem that you don't like immigration, or is the problem something else? And y'all just are too afraid to say it out loud.
Some of them ain't afraid.
So,
They'll
shout
say
to
that
Nico.
shit.
Well, shout out to Nico. I guess you brought this to
I
explain
did.
this.
Yes, so let's give a warm welcome to the AFRIKANER refugees. Some people in the chat know this band. They know what's up. You know, they're South African.
Who are they?
Oh God, what is their actual name? South African band. Giant Wood. That's it. They did some things. They appeared in a couple of movies. The Taika Waititi, what's his name? Trying to remember. Giant Wood movie. Like they were in Chappie. You remember that movie? The robot and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, but Bloom Camp. That's it. That's who I'm thinking of. I know things. I remember things. But their music's weird as shit. For sure.
So, shout out to JB who made this point, similar to Nico. Although, JB, don't respond to
fucking Krasenstein. Ugh.
But JB tweeted, I specifically remember Border Patrol agents whipping Haitian migrants at the border. And yes, that was under the Biden administration. Also, didn't Biden facilitate refugee status to Ukrainians? So please remind me what is so different between the two major parties. Don't worry, I'll wait. And then someone responded to him at Luke Carlos, said, the difference is Democrats are better able to exploit this system and use it to deport even more brown people than Republicans. This despite Republicans' suspension of the rule of law and balance of powers and public displays of fascist tactics. That tweet right there.
Yeah.
So yes, Republicans are more overt in their fascism. Democrats do it too, and more often than not, they do a lot more of it. It's just that you don't hear about it so much when Democrats do it. And unfortunately, I didn't get this tweet up, but I got it earlier tonight. But I'll read it. This is from Creole Comrade, who tweeted, Kamala can directly tell Guatemalans, do not come. And then that same administration grants asylum to 200,000 Ukrainians, and they're all silent. Liberals are spineless fucking jokes of people. So, yeah. So don't forget, like at least with Trump, he only right now has offered asylum to 50 Afrikaners. Biden essentially allowed 200,000 Ukrainians to come in. And I seem to remember a story where Ukrainians were actually getting priority in terms of getting full scholarships or at least some aid at HBCUs that Black people at these colleges and universities weren't necessarily getting. So I seem to remember that over a year or so ago, but no one talked about that. As I said, just for a laugh, I got this TikTok to close the segment. We heard from Nico and we heard some, from JB. But let's see what this white lady has to say regarding
white lady.
Afrikaners coming over to this country. So
This is
we'll
for the
understand.
Americans. If you're not an American, feel free to watch, but please try and get it to the Americans. My name is Bianca van Wyk, born in South Africa, live in South Africa. Today you'll be welcoming the so-called white Afrikaans refugees. They are there based on an offer made to them, which I must say was informed by disinformation about South Africa. Now, I've seen a lot of takes on who Americans think they are receiving. Okay, you are not getting successful, professional, white, middle class South Africans that are fleeing South Africa. The people you are getting are the people that believe that there is discrimination against them based on their race. Keep in mind, we live in the most unequal country in the world. We have, for instance, 70% of agricultural land and agricultural holdings are owned by white South Africans. 62 to 68% of top leadership positions in corporate are filled by white males. There is a huge salary disparity between white South Africans and the rest of the population. And there are a number of other indicators which shows you that this story of discrimination based on race is false. Another thing that I wanted to say is that you will get certain so-called refugees that have experienced crime. However, in South Africa, no one is exempt. These people that you are welcoming assume because they're white, they should not experience crime. The people most affected by crime in South Africa happen to be black people that live in poverty. So as you open your doors and welcome people, and you're going to get a lot of information and disinformation from these people, please do keep that in mind. Oh, I also would like to say all the best and good luck to the Americans.
Look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay.
We now know what he's talking about. That's the African Americans he wants. You know? So.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah. So, as I said, this story was kind of ridiculous, but I think it's kind of important to kind of show, just again, the hypocrisy that, especially among Democrats, like, oh, Trump is doing this. You guys did it, and a whole lot more with Ukrainians. So, so basically, yeah, it's both sides are corrupt. Both sides do it.
And you ain't black.
They discriminate against people of color, but anyone who's white, they more than welcome in. And like I said, these are going to be white people because they're asylum seekers. They're going to get the social benefits that, as I said, a lot of Americans currently who are white are going to lose.
Yeah.
So I hope you all kept that same energy for these Afrikaners in the same way that you have for every other asylum seeker of color who are given the same benefits. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's probably why we're demonetized for talking about shit like this. So if you want to support us financially, feel free to scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the link and type it in at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're in your YouTube chat, feel free to type in !donate, and the link will pop up in the chat, and you can click on the link and you can go to our Ko-fi link right there. Also, if you do not want to give through Ko-fi, you're also able to give through CashApp, PayPal, and Substack, especially if you want to give monthly. But Ko-fi is the fun one because you get to see your chats on screen. So I'm sure that will be the most popular one for you guys. That being said, we also know that a lot of you are kind of struggling financially right now, and we more than understand that. Again, just you being here is gift enough to us. So the free way that you're able to support us is obviously by liking, subbing, and sharing our content. And let us know what you think about this white genocide allegedly that is happening in South Africa and what is causing these migrants to come here. do you think MAGA is going to make a stink over this in the same way they would if it were people of color coming in who are seeking asylum? And thank you, Sean.
Yeah, do what Sean
Money
did.
back,
Be more
Sean.
like
I'm just going
Sean.
to call you. Who gave us a heart and $10, so thank you. And yeah, help us get to free K. We're very close to 2,500. I think we're about 83 folks away from 2,500 last I checked. And thanks for watching.
Yeah. Dope. Cool. So before we get to that, how do we do this every week? We pull stories, Collin, that are like, we aren't corroborating. Like, you find your stories, I find my stories, we bring them together Tuesday night, and it's like, oh, they talked about Haiti and the exploitation of Haiti migrants, and it's like, oh, well, I'll be talking about Haiti this week, so they all go together somehow. Funny how that works.
I think if you talk about capitalism, colonization, which we talk about frequently, it all relates. So, so it's not really a surprise there, but yeah.
Fred Edward over on the Substack said, I just watched a video of a private all-white town being expanded in South Africa. So, we'll have to send me that, Fred, on Twitter if you can. Would appreciate it. But what do we got over on the YouTubes? These poor oppressed children of colonizers in South Africa, says Fred Edward. But people were mentioning my anti-copyright go back in time machine. Very, very useful. So Jacqueline Jack said Trump and Elon are like make apartheid great again. Pretty good.
Right.
So,
Jacqueline also said, I wonder if this has more to do with South Africa taking Israel to court than it has to do with South Africa's supposed racism against the white South Afrikaners. Yep.
Makes sense to me. So, Desert Mantis, the percentage of immigrants in the U.S. has remained largely unchanged since the 1800s. So, interesting how that works. But it's a crisis. They're coming to take our gerbs. What else you got?
That's all I got. A lot of people are talking about food. Making me hungry.
They were making lasagna.
So.
Right, so Trump is letting white South Africans in as refugees, but won't let people from Gaza in as refugees. Nice to know that Trump is getting his priorities right. /S for sarcasm. Yeah. Nice to know you people. People know that. I keep trying to tell people they could put /S for sarcasm. But Indy in the chat telling people to share the show, do the things. So, if you're over on the Rumble, leave us some likes and whatnot. Indy's asking if there's people here besides lizard people. We all know lizard people cannot type. They do not have opposable thumbs. So, if you want to prove you're not a lizard person over on the Rumble, just get in that chat. Let us know what's up. Leave a comment. Do all that jazz. All right. You ready for next one?
Yes,
I'm ready. So, I figured we should do a bit of a history lesson tonight. I found this article in Consortium News from Marlene Eldaut. I'm sure that's Frenchese. But Marlene Eldaut on Haitians' push for reparations for France's 19th century gunboat deal to compensate former enslavers rather than the other way around. Now, Collin, you might be more knowledgeable than I on the history of Haiti. Do you know anything about this? About a gunboat deal and former enslavers being compensated?
I actually do not. So this will be
we're going to learn.
A learning opportunity for me, too.
If we go 200 years ago, we're going to look at France. So in 2002, first of all, Haiti's former president, Jean-Bertrand Artisside, I hope I got that right, argued that France should pay his country $21 billion. I think we might have covered a bit of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we have.
So the reason in 1825, France extracted a huge indemnity from the young nation in exchange for recognition of its independence. So this is this exploitation, right? So April 17th, 2025 marked the 200th anniversary of that indemnity agreement. Thus why it's recent. But on January 1st of this year, the now former president of Haiti's Transitional Presidential Council, Leslie Voltaire, reminded France of this call when he requested that France repay the debt of independence and reparations for slavery. So, in March, tennis star Naomi Osaka, who is of Haitian descent, added her voice to the chorus in a tweet wondering when France would pay Haiti back. As a scholar of 19th century Haitian history and culture, I've dedicated a significant portion of my research to exploring Haiti's particularly strong legal case for restitution from France. The story begins with the Haitian Revolution. France instituted slavery in the colony of Saint Domingo on the western third of the island of Hispaniola, today's Haiti, in the 17th century and the late 18th century. The enslaved population rebelled and eventually declared independence. In the 19th century, the French demanded compensation for the former enslavers of the Haitian people rather than the other way around. Sound familiar, Care Bear?
It's plenty.
Yeah. So, just as the legacy of slavery in the United States has created a gross economic disparity between black and white Americans, the tax on its freedom that France forced Haiti to pay, referred to as an indemnity at the time, severely damaged the newly independent country's ability to prosper. There seems to be a pattern with that. Haiti's officially declared its independence from France on January the 1st, 1804, and October 1806, following the assassination of Haiti's first head of state. The country was split into two, with Alexandre Pétain ruling in the south and Henri Christophe ruling in the north. Despite the fact that both Haiti rulers were veterans of the Haitian Revolution, the French had never quite given up on reconquering their former colony. In 1814, King Louis the 18th. That's how Roman numerals work. XVIII. That should be 18th. Restored as king after the overthrow of Napoleon earlier that year, sent 3 commissioners to Haiti to assess the willingness of the country's rules to surrender. Christophe, crowned king in 1811, remained obstinate in the face of France's exposed plan to bring back slavery. Threatening war, the most prominent member of Christophe's cabinet, Baron de Vestaing, insisted our independence will be guaranteed by the tips of our bayonets. Sound familiar?
Yep.
Nothing like violence to get your shit across. But in contract, Pétain, the ruler of the South, was willing to negotiate, hoping that the country might be able to pay France for recognition of its independence. In 1803, Napoleon had sold Louisiana to the United States for $15 million. Using this number as his compass, Pétain proposed paying the same amount, unwilling to compromise with those he viewed as runaway slaves. Louis XVIII rejected the offer. That's why you don't fucking capitulate to power, you dummy. Pétain died suddenly in 1818, but Jean-Pierre Boyer, his successor, kept up the negotiations. Talks, however, continued to stall due to Christophe's stubborn opposition. So there's Christophe right there in his lovely little band uniform. I like it. Determined to gain at least suzerainty over the island, which would have made Haiti a protectorate of France, Louis XVIII rebuked the 2 commissioners Boyer sent to Paris in 1824 to try and negotiate an indemnity in exchange for recognition. On April 17th, 1825, Charles X, brother to Louis XVIII, and the new French king performed a sudden about-face. Charles X issued a decree stating that France would recognize Haitian independence, but only at the price of 150 million francs in 1825. I wonder what, that is actually worth now,
Billion.
On nearly twice the 80 million francs, right? Twice the 80 million francs the U.S. had paid for the Louisiana territory. So that's from Louisiana
land.
Up into the Great Lakes, right?
Lakes, yeah.
For less,
more land.
Yep.
Way more land. They paid less money.
Yep. So,
because God forbid that, the Native American tribes.
Yep.
Like they had some sympathy for them versus
right.
not charging them versus the black people on half an island.
Yeah. So Baron de Macau, who Charm X sent to deliver the ordinance. So here's how he came up, right? How would you come up asking your boy for money he owes you? Right? That's essentially how this happened. 14 brigs of war carrying more than 500 cannons showed up in Haiti, being like, where's our motherfucking money? All right? His instructions stated that his mission was not a negotiation. It was not diplomacy either. It was extortion. That is, I do believe how they talk about it. Although some people claim it's insurance. You wouldn't want anything bad to happen to little old Haiti, would you? So amid the threat of violent war and a looming economic blockade, on July 11th, 1825, Boyer signed the fatal document with gun to his head, which stated the present inhabitants of the French part of Saint Domingo shall pay in 5 equal installments the sum of 150 million francs, destined to indemnify the former colonists. So,
you know what? I will say this now, because I said this to you last night as we were prepping. I was in a Twitter space a couple of nights ago, and we were talking about France. And I think the guy Middle Eastern, but French adjacent, was mentioning how in France, generally if you go to France, they're very particular about foreigners in terms of you coming in, respecting the culture and all that kind of stuff, and they do everything they can to preserve the culture in terms of the language, the food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And kind of as an aside to that, several years ago, I went to Belgium, and I stayed in Antwerp, which is in the Flemish part of the country. So that's the Dutch-German part. And I wanted to go to Brussels, meaning that's the capital. But in Brussels, that's the southern part of Belgium where they speak French. So my friends who I was staying with at the time were like, well, do you speak French? And I was like, I took French in middle school and high school, but not enough where I'm able to speak fluently. So they were like, if you go, well, they suggested I don't go because they were like, if you don't speak French, then no one's gonna fucking help you. So you might as well just stay in Antwerp, at least because they do speak English there. So I would had such a difficult time. But yeah, it's the idea that the French are very particular about foreigners coming in their country, and preserving, the idea, stereotypically, they get mad at Americans for our American ways and all of that.
Yeah.
But in the same breath, so going back to the spaces, so one guy was talking about all of that, but then this guy was like, fuck the French, because they are coming in and they don't give a fuck about languages of what the indigenous people speak. They're like, no, you're fucking going to learn French. We're fucking going to take your shit and what you got to say about it. So it's funny, yeah. I think it's funny, you do see this kind of now, like the French have this attitude of almost pompous in terms of, but yet still the colonizers from back in the day didn't necessarily have that same intent with the countries that they colonized over. So just as a little side, but kind of relates to all of this, in terms of, like reparations, that they were like, no, you're giving us reparations because, like, like just ridiculousness, but how that's kind of carried on in the present day in kind of subtle ways in France. So,
so destined to indemnify the former colonists, right? So, newspaper articles from the period revealed that the French king knew the Haitian government was hardly capable of making these payments, as the amount was nearly 6 times Haiti's total annual revenue. The rest of the world seemed to agree that the agreement was absurd. One British journalist, the British, noticed that the enormous price constituted a sum which few states in Europe could bear to sacrifice. So they're like, we couldn't fucking afford that. Jesus. So forced to borrow 30 million francs from French banks to make the first 2 payments, it was hardly a surprise to anyone when Haiti defaulted soon thereafter.
Oh, God. This is exactly like student loans.
Yeah. Still, a subsequent French king sent another expedition in 1838 with 12 warships to force the Haitian president's hand. The 1838 revision, inaccurately labeled Traité d'amitié, or Treaty of Friendship.
Traité d'amitié.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, Traité d'amitié. Yeah.
Reduced the outstanding amount owed to 60 million francs, but the Haitian government was once again ordered to take out crushing loans to pay the balance. I just love this extortion. It's just, it was the Haitian people who suffered the brunt of the consequences. Boyer levied draconian taxes in order to pay back the loans, and while Christophe had been busy developing a national school system during his reign, under Boyer and all subsequent presidents, such projects had to be put on hold. Moreover, researchers have found that the independence debt and the resulting drain on the Haitian treasury were directly responsible not only for the underfunding of education in 20th century Haiti, but also for the lack of health care and the country's inability to develop public infrastructure. And there was something that the Clintons did after that I do remember making this a whole hell of a lot worse. But yeah, so a 2022 analysis by the New York Times furthermore revealed that Haitians ended up paying more than 112 million francs over 7 decades, or $560 million, estimated between 22 billion and 44 billion in today's dollars. Which that little fucking island is not capable of producing that. You know?
Right.
So
half island at that.
Yes.
A third of an island at that.
Right. That has had earthquakes and all sorts of terribleness. But recognizing the gravity of this scandal, French economist Thomas Piketty had argued that France should repay at least 28 billion to Haiti in restitution, which is like, he's shooting for somewhere in the middle of that estimate, right? So
he's saying at least.
Right. So, yeah, you probably should do the 44 billion, but
right. I mean, yeah, I would argue shoot for the moon, but he's saying at least,
So this I find funny. A French propaganda engraving from 1825 depicting King Charles X bestowing freedom on a black man kneeling before him in chains. Except this motherfucker been extorting that same black man. Like, kind of
Again,
funny
you know
how
what? Like again, I think of college.
Yep.
It's like think of it in that way. Like, they give you a degree and then like, all right, you're off in the world, you got do what you need to do, but these loans are going to shackle you for the rest of your life.
It's just like propaganda today, right? You see Trump push like, well, now I'm pro-Palestinian. Meanwhile, motherfuckers making back deals in the smoke-filled rooms. So I just propaganda has been a thing for a long time, is what I'm trying to explain. But former French president, from Jacques Chirac to Nicolas Sarkozy to Francois Hollande. Francois, that's it.
Hollande.
Have a history of
Hollande.
Yep. Punishing, skirting, or downplaying Haitian demands for recompense. In May 28th, when Hollande became France's second head of state to visit Haiti, he admitted that his country needed to settle the debt. Later realizing he had unwillingly provided fuel for the legal claims already prepared by attorney Ira Kurzban on behalf of the Haitian people. Hollande clarified that he meant France's debt was merely moral.
Oh, God. So in other words, I meant it symbolically.
I meant it symbolically, bro.
Not literally.
It was just a figure of speech, dog. I mean, when I said I got you, I didn't mean I got you. You know what I'm saying? To deny that the consequences of slavery were also material is to deny French history itself. France belatedly abolished slavery in 1848 in its remaining colonies of Martinique, Guadeloupe, Réunion, and French Guiana, which are still territories of France today. Afterward, the French government demonstrated once again its understanding of slavery's relationships to economics when it financially compensated the former owners of enslaved people. The resulting racial wealth gap is no metaphor. In metropolitan France, 14.1% of the population lives below the poverty line. In Martinique and Guadeloupe, in contrast, where more than 80% of the population is of African descent, the poverty rates are 38% and 46%, respectively. The poverty rate in Haiti is even more dire, at 59%. And whereas the gross domestic product per capita, the best measure of a country's standard of living, is $44,690 in France, it's a mere $1,693 in Haiti. The discrepancies can be viewed as the concrete consequences of stolen labor from generations of Africans and their descendants. In recent years, French academics have begun to increasingly contribute to the conversation about the longitudinal harms the indemnity brought to Haiti. Yet, what effectively amounts to a statement of no comment has historically been the only response from France's current government under President Macron. On April 17th, the bicentennial of the indemnity ordinance, Macron finally broke his silence. In official communique, Macron acknowledged the heavy financial indemnity his country imposed upon Haiti and announced a joint Franco-Haitian commission responsible for examining our common past and shedding light on all its dimensions. But he did not...
So in other words...
Yes.
What is it called? What would we call that here? Shoot.
You remember?
Like when they form committees, but
all talk and
study it.
Yes.
What's that called?
I forget. Brain trusting of some kind.
Yeah. Oh, in the chat, you probably know what I'm talking about. So say the word that I mean.
Yeah.
So
committees of some kind. But he did not address the question of reparations. Many Haitians were rightfully not satisfied. The only initiative from France that would really matter, they said, would be one detailing how it plans to provide economic recompense to the Haitian people. So, funny how the international stories make a difference to talks of reparations here. Funny how that works, right?
Right. And this is why, especially in America, we need to talk about reparations, not just in terms of the US alone. Like, we need to be a lot more aware of the need for reparations within the diaspora. Like, that's why I make the case that, yes, I understand that Black Americans have a different culture and like, and call yourself an ethnic group, fine. I totally get that. But there's a lot of commonalities between among what is happening in the Caribbean and what is happening here and what has happened to Europe in terms of Black people. So it makes more sense to me to kind of align together and kind of have this discussion. And here's the thing. Because I know you in particular, we've had this conversation, you know, like, well, like, you understand what the belief of Black reparations, but what does that mean in terms of you as a white lower, I don't want to give you a socioeconomic status like that, but like lower socioeconomic status as a white person. Here's the thing though, like, this has nothing to do with you per se in terms of you, Reef, owe me reparations. This has everything to do with corporations that have profited off of this. It has to do with the countries that have profited off of this.
Yeah.
And in some cases, especially like in the UK, which we talked about, like the monarchy that has profited off of this, that is worth billions now, off our backs. And as I keep saying to Black Americans, like, and a lot of you refuse to believe that you're from Africa, whatever. You can deny that history all you want. But once upon a time, like, your ancestors came from Africa. And originally, this country was not America in a way that you think of it now. The country became America 100 years after the first people from Africa landed in this country. And who brought you here? It wasn't American. It was the British. Or in my case, it was the British and the French, because my grandfather on my mom's side is from Grenada, another French colony. So I have some French colonizer blood in me. So, but this is kind of makes the case of having the, at minimum, having these discussions to have that understanding and not pit other Black people against each other when essentially we're looking for the same thing. Like, this is the thing, especially within the ADOS, like FBA community, that I find so sick, is the idea like, you're going to have an issue with me who has more in common than you, especially in terms of a situation like this. It said that the white people that, well, the colonizers or the corporations that essentially put us all in the same boat, but you're going to have the issue with me. Like, that makes no damn sense. So, and again, if you don't agree, I don't fucking care. Like, it's funny how other communities are able, when they need something, are able to align and find common ground on certain things, but not among Black people. And not all Black people, I want to make that perfectly clear, but certain Black people, especially online, seemingly have this issue. And I think it needs to stop. And I think that's what people, especially in the elites and especially in media, are weaponizing to make the case for you not to get reparations. And like I said, not to say within the diaspora has been perfect, but at least we've talked about several politicians and leaders in the diaspora, like in the Caribbean and in Barbados in particular, that have made the case for reparations in speaking to other dignitaries and prime ministers and presidents of whom they're involved in, basically like, what are you doing? And granted, they can't say shit, but at least the conversation is being had, like, at minimum. Like, look at all the people here. You have Black people in media basically saying, fuck reparations, y'all don't deserve it. So, you know, no, I'm saying that because that's what it is. It's like, there are plenty of people in media who would say that Black people do not deserve reparations. But I don't necessarily hear people online. And again, online is a fake world. But like, I don't hear these people going after them, but they'll go after someone like me and basically call me everything but a child of God because I acknowledge my African ancestry, and I acknowledge my Caribbean ancestry, you know, and I kind of make the case of we need to align on this issue in particular. And I'm like, no, you worry about your issues with your people and we worry about ours. And meanwhile, you ain't got nothing to show for it right now. Like, at least with Haiti, they actually caused a revolution to the point now, granted, like France fucked them over.
Yeah.
You know, but that was out of the idea of like they stood their ground. And they actually, so this is like the eternal sin that they have to bear, you know? So, like, Black Americans, no offense, have not caused a revolution in that regard, like, that would force, you know, the West to basically rob them blind. And again, yes, in different ways, yes. But this is the sin that Haitians had to bear. But yet these are Haitians that you will kind of cuss out when they come to this country looking for things and needing things. So, you know, so yeah, that's just kind of my sandbox issue. You guys know this, but but just need to make that case once again.
Well, talking about those issues is probably why YouTube feels like they should demonetize us. So you can go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork or scan that QR code on your screen. As always, links to donate are in the description below. And if you can't give monetarily because times are tough and you're one of the poor such as ourselves, just like and subscribe, hit the share button, leave a comment, let us know what you think. What's your take on this gunboat diplomacy? Otherwise, thanks for watching. Yay, we did it.
Yeah.
Do the chats, Care Bear.
There's actually quite a bit. So hold on. So Jacqueline said, I know a little bit about this in terms of your segment. Not all the specifics, but I read about it in Akala's book, Natives, Race, and Class in the Ruins of Empire. So I actually checked it out. It looks really good. It might be a book I might want to read. So thank you for mentioning that book, Jacqueline. Also from Jacqueline, not many people in the UK know this, but when slave owners in Britain were compensated after the slave trade was banned, it took until 2015 to pay that off.
Jesus. Like,
see, there's a little bit more. Yeah, people in the chat talking about like personal issues, sadly. Just people struggling. So like I said, guys, we appreciate if you donate, but obviously given what you guys are mentioning in the chat, and I won't put your business out there, like make sure you do what you can to reach out to your community if you need help. And
Jacqueline said
take care of yourselves.
Gunboat diplomacy at its finest. So
yeah.
You know.
Let's see, there was more. Jacqueline, again, the money that Britain, France, and Spain must owe out in reparations must be huge. Yes, that's why, again, so when and I'll make this clarification again, when Black people are talking about reparations, we're not talking about taking it from you guys. Like, that's not where we're looking at it from. We're looking at it in terms of corporations that have long since profited off, the countries themselves that have profited off, and depending on the country, the monarchies that have profited off our backs. So it's nothing to do with you guys. Like, you don't owe us reparations in that regard. But I would make the argument because, look, I can say that it's terms of reparations, but I wouldn't necessarily call it reparations for anyone else, depending on your people group or whatever. But I can also make the case for like equity as far as wealth for everybody. I can make that case for healthcare in terms of everybody, in light of the fact that, you know, for Black people's need for reparations. So I would argue, if you want those things for yourselves, you should make a stand as well, or you should make the case in allyship with Black people for reparations. Because guess what? If we got reparations, that makes a stronger case for you all to be like, well, you know, if Black people were able to get this, how can we make this equitable for everybody? So
Right.
in whatever means that means for everybody else. So so I just want you guys to think of it in that way. I know we've had conversations among our community in the past regarding that. But you can make the case for you, like, you know, why not do all? Again, shoot for the moon. You can make the case for yourselves and make the case for reparations for Black people as well. Like, it shouldn't be like one over the other. It should be, let's do it all and like figure out as we go. And again, I won't admit I am an expert on this, but it's a lot easier to talk about issues, you know, regarding the universality of things without talking about the specific needs of Black people in the diaspora in general, in terms of how we were mistreated and how, you know, hell, we can make the case right now for like Israelis, like given what they've gone through as far as the Holocaust, and look what they're getting now out of it. Like, now I could argue, sure, they've suffered, but the way that it's kind of perpetuated in terms of essentially a land grab, an illegal land grab in Palestine, and the things that we're giving them in response is ridiculous. And I think a lot of us can make that claim. But when it comes to us as Black people, are like, oh, like, that happened a long time ago. Like, you guys don't deserve it. Like, things are a lot fairer now. Like, deal with it. Like, you don't hear that from the Israelis. And like, as we talked about in the last segment, you're not hearing the government say that to these Afrikaners who, by all intents and purposes, are doing well for themselves and don't necessarily need to come here in order to get more things that they're not giving you.
Right.
So, or taking away from you, essentially. Let's see, anything else? I think that is it.
Yeah. People hanging out on the Substack. People go start over on the Rumble. But anyway, I'm ready for your next one. So
yeah. Okay. So as I said earlier, the story is kind of like an addendum to last week. Last week we talked about Ibrahim Traore and how he was influenced by Thomas Sankara, who was a former president of Burkina Faso, in terms of what he did in order to, you know, empower his people. So Ibrahim is kind of using his philosophy to kind of do that now. And one, he's young, so he's 37 years old. So obviously, being that he is so young, he will be around for a long time unless, you know, the West does something. So, but given how he has mobilized not just his country, but in a lot of ways, I would argue a lot of Africa, and I think especially, you know, throughout the world, especially where there's Black people, you know, people are starting to take notice of him, and in other countries as well. But we'll get into that later. The West is quaking in their boots over him. So we're going to get into a little bit more of the tea regarding that. Thanks to Alan McLeod, who did this reporting. So this is from Consortium News as well as Mint Press. I think one of your screens is up. Brief voice.
There you go. Sorry.
Thank you. So, so Alan reports Burkina Faso's 37-year-old leader, George U.S. Ayer, Ibrahim Traore, took power in a military coup in September 2022, and since then he has been drawing criticism from Western governments, not least the U.S. So Alan continues, Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traore is remaking his nation and in the process making enemies in the West. Since taking power in 2022, the young military leader has expelled French troops, ejected Western corporations, and aligned his country with Russia, Cuba, and Venezuela. We're going to get more into that later. Thank you, Finito, for reporting on that on Hotspot as well. Promoting Pan-African unity and national self-reliance while surviving coup attempts, Traore, 37, is positioning himself as a radical anti-imperialist and has drawn fire from Washington and Paris. Mint Press News explores the project underway in, Ouagadougou, and the global forces trying to stop it. I guess that's how you say it. According to government statements, Traore narrowly survived a foreign orchestrated coup attempt last month. Security Minister Mahamoud Sana said that the military junta foiled a major plot to storm the presidential palace on April 16th. The plotters, he said, were based in Ivory Coast, a Washington-backed neighbor where American military presence has recently expanded. Ever since he took power in a military coup in September 2022, Traore has been drawing criticism from Western governments, not least the United States. On April 3rd, General Michael Langley, commander of U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, who we've talked about probably 2 years ago now, I guess, spoke before the U.S. Senate, accusing the Barakambe leader of corruption and helping Russia and China establish an imperial foothold in Africa. I argue that's already been happening, Traore aside. So this isn't anything new. But AFRICOM, the Pentagon's regional command for Africa, coordinates U.S. military operations, intelligence gathering, and security partnerships across the continent, often framed as counterterrorism operations. On the day of the coup, the U.S. Embassy changed its travel guidelines for Burkina Faso to do not travel. Langley reportedly met with Ivorian Defense Minister Tene Ibrahim Ouattara numerous times this year, both before and after the coup. Since coming to power, Traore has been systematically limiting the influence of Western powers in his country, calling it a matter of national sovereignty. In January 2023, he expelled the French ambassador, calling the country an imperialist state. 1 month later, he ordered French troops to leave Burkina Faso. This helped spark a wave of other Western African nations formerly part of the French Empire to do the same. Today, Mali, Chad, Senegal, Niger, and Ivory Coast have expelled French forces from their lands. President Emmanuel Macron responded by accusing Burkina Faso and others of ingratitude. Shut the fuck up. Adding that these nations forgot to thank. Fuck off! Forgot to thank France.
Yeah, okay.
Traore's administration has also blocked or expelled numerous Western government-sponsored media outlets, labeling them as agents of neocolonialism. That needs to happen here.
Mm-hmm.
God damn. Radio France International and France 24 were first. Then followed Voice of America, Britain's BBC, and German Deutsche Welle in 2024. These moves drew strong criticism from Western organizations. Human Rights Watch, for example, accused the government of a crackdown on dissent. Although it formerly independent for over half a century, France maintained significant control over its former African colonies. 14 nations used the CFA franc, an international currency set at a fixed rate against the French franc, and now the euro. This means that importing from and exporting to France, and now Europe, is very cheap, but doing the same with the rest of the world is prohibitively expensive. France maintains a veto over the monetary policies of the CFA franc, leaving African states economically dependent on Paris. Traore has described the CFA franc as a mechanism that maintains African slavery and has announced his intention to create a new currency. Along with Malawi and Niger, Burkina Faso has broken away from the Western-backed economic community of West African states, also known as ECOWAS, regional bloc, and established the alliance of Sahel states, Pan-African Union of States that sees itself as its first step towards a unified anti-imperialist Africa. Sounds very Gaddafi-esque.
Don't be saying none of that. Don't be reminding people. Don't be reminding none of those folks. I brought this.
So you brought this to me earlier,
and normally
so
I don't like this fucking guy. He gets plenty of shit wrong, so take it with a grain of salt. It could possibly be not
actually
accurate.
kind of looking at the thread, this may not necessarily be true. We don't know. But
yeah. It's probably still a big number, I'm betting, you know.
Right.
But Burkina Faso reportedly made $18 billion from gold mines since Ibrahim Traore took over office. They were previously paid $1 billion a year by a foreign company. This is what decolonialization looks like. This is why they want him dead. I mean, this goes in charge with wasn't France? Was it France that was also upset at uranium not being shipped to them? Right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah. Doesn't like a bit of resources for the Europeans to get upset over losing.
Right.
But anyway.
This was the dream of the revolutionary Burkinabe leader Thomas Sankara. Like Traore, Sankara was a military officer who seized power in 1983 in his early 30s. And in just 4 years, he introduced sweeping reforms to boost the nation's productivity and minimize reliance on foreign aid, stating that he who feeds you controls you. He promoted domestic, small-scale agriculture to produce nutritious, locally grown food. While many of the region's leaders embezzled public funds, Sankara's socialist revolution built social housing and health centers and tackled mass illiteracy. A feminist, he outlawed forced marriages and female genital mutilation and made a point of appointing large numbers of women to high positions of power.
Yeah.
Sankara was assassinated in 1987. It was only after Traore came to power that his killer, former President Blaise Compaoré, was convicted in absentia. Compaoré lives in exile in Ivory Coast.
Didn't even eye for an eye, that guy. They exiled him. But anyway.
Traore sees himself as a disciple of Sankara and his movement. Western commentators are split on whether he truly follows in the legendary leader's footsteps. Some, such as Daniel Ineza of African Center for Strategic Studies, a Pentagon think well, that should probably say all we need to know.
Yep.
State that the comparisons end with the leader's penchant for military fatigues and red berets. Others, such as the Economist magazine, lament that Traore is a genuine article, a development that spells bad news for big business. But few can deny that he is extremely popular. Ghanaian President John Mahama, for instance, noted that Traore attended his inauguration in January and received far more applause than anyone, including Mahama himself. Many of Traore's initiatives are directly inspired by the Sankara era. The new military government has emphasized achieving food sovereignty. A new $1 billion initiative has been launched to mechanize agriculture and increase the production of staple crops such as rice, maize, and potatoes, which we talked about last week. Actually, that clip, I believe, premiered over the weekend, so check that out. If you want to watch that, hear more about that. Traore has also made moves to nationalize the nation's mining industry. Burkina Faso's economy revolves around gold, with the precious metal accounting for over 80% of its exports. The country is the world's 13th largest producer of gold, making around 100 tons per year, equivalent to about 6 billion. Yet, because foreign corporations own and control production, the nation and its people see precious little benefit from the industry. Indeed, the annual Burkinabe GDP is only around $18 billion. Why does resource-rich Africa remain the poorest region in the world? The heads of African states should not behave like puppets in the hands of the imperialists, Traore said. In August, his government nationalized 2 key Western old gold mines, paying only $18 million, a fraction of the $300 million they reportedly sold for in 2023. In November, the administration announced the construction of the country's first gold refinery. Burkina Faso remains a nation in crisis. The government, and indeed much of the Sahel region, is locked in a bitter battle with well-armed Islamic groups who rose to power and prominence after NATO's 2011 intervention in Libya. Since then, Libya has become an exporter of extremism, destabilizing the region. It's estimated that up to 40% of Burkina Faso is in the control of Al-Qaeda or Islamic State affiliated forces. Over 1,000 people in the country lost their lives to these groups in 2024. It is for this reason that Traore has justified postponing the elections he promised when he came to power, a decision that many have criticized. Elections are not the priority. Clearly, security is the priority, he said. It remains to be seen whether the Burkinabe people will accept this decision. Perhaps the most questionable action of the war occurred in 2023 in the village of Kama, where around 150 people were massacred. Although the massacre was strongly condemned by the government, rights groups such as Amnesty International had labeled them responsible for the killings. While he has expelled French forces working on counterinsurgency, Traore has welcomed in Russian military advisors. He also flew to Moscow to attend Russia's Victory Day parade on May 9th, where he met with President Vladimir Putin. Such actions have caused serious consternation in Washington and Brussels. However, with the U.S. military concentrating on China and Russia, and the French is a weaker position in West Africa than ever, it is unclear whether military intervention is an option. A coup attempt or assassination appears more likely.
Yep.
Time will tell whether Traore will leave an indelible a mark on Burkina Faso as his hero, Thomas Sankara. Many African leaders have come to power promising radical change, but have failed to deliver. Yet his message on Pan-Africanism, anti-imperialism, and self-reliance is certainly striking a chord. Traore is talking the talk. Now he must walk the walk. And he seems like he is, barring, and we've talked about this, even with Traore, we kind of but I think in terms of, look, I'll say this, if the people of Burkina Faso love it, then we should, because ultimately it's about them and what they need and how they're looking for that sovereignty, and Traore is definitely seemingly trying to offer that to them. So yeah, I think even with Alan having to take what he reported, and he's great, somewhat with a grain of salt, and I think, again, we can find nuance in even Traore, if given the information that we do have so far. But it does seem right, at least right now, but the fact that, even according to Alan, they're looking to unalive the guy. That to me is a clear indication that he must be doing the right thing. Because even in Africa, and I think someone in the chat, I think said, countries in Africa are only independent by name. I totally agree. They're not truly independent. I would argue all of them. There's still many of them, if not all of them, are still complicit with, well, not just the West, but look, China, they've done a lot for African countries, but I personally have an issue with them too, to some regard. They're not promoting, sovereignty or having Africans own the rights to production in those countries where, they're there to claim to support the work of what's happening on the continent. Look, I have issues with them too, and to a degree, Russia as well. That being said, and it's colonization, but less so, I guess you could argue.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just are willing to pay what is actually the products are worth, mainly,
versus exploiting them royally, to the point where these countries are, as we discussed with Haiti, in debt to
Right.
where they would never pay it off, and they're at the mercy of the West
Yep.
in this case. So
You
you
brought
could
this.
argue that China, yes.
From
So I mentioned how Traore has met with Ibrahim and Maduro, well, Venezuela president. Very significant, and thank you to Nico once again for this clip. But I thought it was very appropriate given, what Alan McLeod reported on. So let's see what Nico has to bring to the table in regards to Traore.
This is why they want Ibrahim Traore gone. Yeah, this photo too. You see this? Him with Nicolas Maduro. That's why they want Ibrahim Traore gone. While the West, and specifically the United States, has been busy trying to demonize Ibrahim Traore, he's been out here playing chess while the United States and the West is playing checkers. Now we have to remember the way that the United States and the West has been able to take out African leaders is by individualizing them, by keeping them isolated from the rest of the world, especially superpowers that they could potentially ally with and get some type of economic or military partnership that can protect them. And we already know that Ibrahim has successfully created a coalition between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, but a coalition between Maduro in Venezuela and Putin in Russia and Ibrahim in Burkina Faso takes their potential to a different level entirely. Let's talk about it. As you all know, for a couple of years, Burkina Faso has been in a military alliance with Russia, but recently they've been in a resource-based economic alliance, making a deal to help them extract the gold and rare minerals from Burkina Faso. And Russia would simultaneously provide security for the gold that is extracted. And of course, as you know previously, that gold and that infrastructure was almost completely controlled by France and did not benefit the people of Burkina Faso in any way. Now, this infrastructure, the mine, this gold is important, but it's not only gold. See, the one thing Ibrahim has shown us is that he understands the importance of diversifying one's economy. Enter Maduro in Venezuela. You see, at the moment, unfortunately, Burkina Faso is completely reliant on oil supply from outside of the country because as of right now, there are no known oil deposits and they have no way to refine it, even if they did find oil. But you know who has a lot of oil? Venezuela. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Nico, it doesn't matter if Venezuela has a bunch of oil. They have no way to refine it, which is how they've ended up in the situation they're in right now. Skirt! Pump
yeah, Russia does.
Because Venezuela just got done finalizing a deal in which Russia will help provide equipment and help them refine the oil that was once unrefinable due to lack of resources, which means very shortly Venezuela will be one of the top producers of oil in the world. So given the diplomatic relationship between Ibrahim and Maduro and the fact that they had this meeting in Moscow probably means that Burkina Faso will also benefit from this deal that Russia made with Venezuela, and they will be able to get a stake in that oil. And every time Burkina Faso benefits from any type of economic advancement, the coalition between them, Mali, and Niger also benefits. And the more that specific coalition benefits, the more enticing it becomes to join that coalition from the perspective of other African nations. What we are witnessing is that one man understands the moment that we are in, that we are entering an era of multipolarity. We are in a multipolar world, and they want to take him out now because the more allies he builds, the more his coalition grows, the more difficult it becomes to take him out. Because you can't kill an economy that's diversified. And you can't convince the people to want to overthrow their government that's improved their lives in every way imaginable directly because of the actions of that government. Those meetings were a clear message to the West. You better get with it or get gone. Because it's a new day in Africa and a new day in the global South. And if you don't want to live in the world that we're living in, fine. But this multipolar world is coming. In fact, many would say it's already here. And if you don't want to be a part of it, that's fine. Suffer the consequences. But the rest of us already benefit from the opportunities that come from cooperation instead of imperialism.
Well,
shout out to Nico for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be
Especially what we
smooth
hear
sailing because I think the West will have issues. You know?
No, but our guess is Traore knows that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't care. So, I think that's the cool thing. He, again, if he's following Sankara as an example, he knows what it possibly can happen, what will happen to him. So the idea that Russia is offering security, that's huge for him. But I think more especially given that, he's probably going to be able to profit, but like being able to benefit from the oil that Venezuela is now able to refine, that more than likely will be able to go to Burkina Faso, and by extension, the other Sahel countries as well. And if that happens, then West Africa, watch out. Because I would imagine like other countries on that side, like Ghana, Nigeria, like
Congo.
Benin, like all those other countries on that side, they're going to be looking at this and being like, oh, we want some of that. You know, so yeah, it's why. Yeah, obviously the West is like shitting their pants right now because, like, you know, look at this black motherfucker who is actually like telling us to get out and is actually making the moves necessary to diversify the needs of his country by, you know, connecting with people that, especially given its that the U.S. in particular does not like. So yeah, like it's not looking good for them. But as I said, at the end of the day, it's a matter of what the people want. And if the people want it and if they're happy for it, then go off. We can't say shit. So, and I mean, we can make our comments, we can make our critiques, but ultimately it's about what the people are needing and what they're desiring. And it seems like they're very much for it. So we'll go with that for now. And we'll update you guys if anything. Yeah, I mean, we can't speak to their needs since we don't live there. So, you know, so I think that's the easiest way we can kind of look at it for now. And like I said, we'll just keep you guys updated regarding what happens in the region. So I think in that regard, I think it's a good thing. So, but I think it's showing, you know, the potential what one person can do when, again, it's the idea of like looking at the past and looking at the examples that people left behind and remixing it to the current age. Like, as I think I said this last week, we try to reinvent the wheel to try something new, but oftentimes it's just like, look at what people did before and just do that and call it a day. And that's exactly what Traore is doing. And it seems to be working in his favor in that regard. So, but yeah, like talking about stories like this is why, or Traore doing this is probably why he's not looked favorably in the West. And talking about we are demonetized. So if you want to help us financially, you can feel free to scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or go to the Ko-fi link that you see in the bottom of your screen and type that in your search engine. Or if you're in the YouTube chat, you can type in !donate, all one word, and the link will pop up in the chat, and you can click on the link and you can donate to Ko-fi right there. Any amount as low as $1 will help us. But also we understand that you guys might be struggling, and I saw it again in the chat. Some of you guys are going through it right now. So you have no obligation to give to us, so we will appreciate it. The free way that you can support us is obviously by liking, subscribing, and sharing our content. And don't forget to like the stream or the segment when we do clip it out, and let us know in the chat or in the comments, you know, what do you think of all of this regarding Traore really fighting the imperialism and colonization that has occurred in this region of the world for centuries now? And do you think that this is the type of stuff that should happen in the West, especially in terms of having a radical revolution that I think people on the left are looking for? Is this a thing, especially looking at Tom Sankara, is this a person that we should be looking towards as an example of the potential that we have towards actual change that benefits the people? Let us know in the chat or let us know in the comments. And thank you guys for watching.
Yay. Cool. Well, before we get to that, we should probably check in on the chats. I saw some at the top. If I scroll back up.
So Desert Mantis have great respect for Traore. Jacqueline, I'm liking this Traore look already. Desert Mantis again, Traore wants Africa to be independent of its colonial past. Desert Mantis again, pretty cool that Putin met with Traore.
Yeah.
Natalie, hope your internet is fine, that you're able to watch us.
Yeah.
Desert Mantis, uranium from Niger, no?
Yeah, I do believe so.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Phil, we reported that at some point.
And then there was lithium
Natalie
somewhere
Williams,
else.
I feel the shade. Right. Natalie Williams, I feel the shades of Libya. Yep. As I said, we get Gaddafi vibes. So, you know, Jacqueline in chat, I bet at the time Thomas Sankara was described as a military dictator. Probably. I would say yes.
Jacqueline, this is analogous to an abused child finally growing up and standing up to their abuser. Yep.
Right.
So, all right. Well, let's get to our next one. And Go Start said PSA over on the Rumble, Trump bombed Somalia 5x in the last week. So, yay. All right.
Right. We should probably report on that if we find anyone that did report on it. That might be kind of tricky. But well, thank you for letting us know that, though.
Appreciate it. Last story this evening, and I feel like I've had a theme the last couple of months, and the EI makes it easy for me to do. So, I've wanted to bring actual voices from what's happening in Gaza from the people that are there, and because I don't think that's done enough. So, we're going to continue to do that this evening. So, I don't even know the name of this voice. They asked to stay anonymous at the EI, but they wrote this on the 7th of May, so not too long ago. But they write, the walls of a nylon tent are very thin. Our neighbors were just a meter away, though it felt like they were even closer. The tents were so tightly packed in the Yarmouk Stadium in Gaza City that I heard every sound as if there was no barrier at all. One evening, it would be a neighbor bathing. I could hear the buckets being filled, the water splashing, even the zippers being zipped. In the next moment, it was an argument or a conversation, most often about food. This is my share. Don't pretend you didn't take extra yesterday. Or, we waited in line for hours and now there's nothing left for my children. How is that fair? People's lives were unfolding right beside me with only a thin piece of fabric between us, barely enough to divide space, let alone protect dignity. From tent to tent, our different noises blended into each other, but each sound was distinct, even silence. Just I could hear every detail of their lives, they could hear mine. Neighbors knew when my husband and I whispered to each other. When the baby woke up crying, they knew if we had managed to get food that day, or if we hadn't. Even outside the tent, my life was exposed in a way I'd never experienced before. With comments on my clothes or other matters, no emotion could be held in private. Our lives were open books, unwillingly read by everyone around us. Personal space no longer existed. My husband, 6-year-old daughter, infant son, and I lived in a tent at Yarmouk Stadium from July to December of 2024. Before the war, the stadium was the site of soccer games. Then, Israel used the stadium in late 2023 to detain, interrogate, and torture men. We set up our tent, a few plastic sheets and pieces of nylon stretched over wooden poles in the heat of summer 2024. The ground beneath was sand and dirt, which turned to mud when it rained. There was no insulation from the heat during the day or the cold at night. The plastic made it unbearably hot when the sun was out, and at night it offered no protection from the biting chill. We had no partitions inside, just a few thin mattresses laid directly on the ground, shared by the whole family, The flap we tried to close with a piece of cloth and rope served as the door to our tent. We had no bathroom, no running water, and no electricity. Only a single shared light bulb was outside the tent, powered by a generator that rarely had enough gasoline to work for long. In the tent, there was no such thing as me. It was a space for survival and nothing else. At night, my children would ask, why are people always yelling? How could I explain to them that real walls are not just made of bricks, they're made of privacy, of dignity. Breastfeeding my child at the time was a suffocating task, physically and psychologically. I had to cover myself entirely with whatever large swath of fabric I could find, even in the unbearable heat, just to provide some measure of privacy. I constantly feared being seen. I felt helpless, not being able to give my child the comfort he deserved. Before the war, I lived with my in-laws for 5 years. Though they were kind, it was a great relief when my husband and I moved into our home in Bet Lahia in northern Gaza in April. It was for me the embodiment of peace, a room with a door I could close when I wished, a kitchen to cook any meal I wanted, a space adorned according to my taste and preferences. In May 2024, we were forced to evacuate to a relative's house in the Al-Daraj neighborhood of Gaza City, where 15 of us were crammed into a room that would comfortably fit 4. And I doubt very comfortably at that. There, the psychological war began. I couldn't change my clothes without asking everyone to look away, as if my body were no longer my own. I couldn't cry when I needed to cry. There was simply no space for sadness. I would escape to the bathroom to sit in silence for a few minutes, but knocks on the door would come immediately. Hurry up, it's my turn. Even my silence had no place. I thought that overcrowded room was the worst it could get, but in July 2024 at around 4 a.m., that very house was shelled while we were inside. We rushed to the basement and stayed there until 7 a.m. When the situation calmed down slightly, we were able to leave. It was a terrifying night, and we left with nothing on our backs. We fled again, and this is when we moved to the tent at Yarmouk Stadium. One night, the suffocation inside the tent was unbearable. I needed a minute alone. I walked out into the dark, sat behind a piece of rubble, and cried. As I was on my way back to the tent, my neighbor asked gently, "Are you okay?" I heard you. We returned home in late January during the ceasefire. The walls of our home were falling down, the house had been burned, and the tiles were cracked. We tried to make it somewhat livable by covering the open area with plastic sheets. I was finally able to cook the meals my children had longed for during the war. Those dishes they once whispered about in the tent, and I would have to ask them to be quiet so others wouldn't hear the names of those dishes and feel their pain. But we did not stay long in the north. Israel began their attacks again. We are now in the Al-Nasser neighborhood of Gaza City, living with my husband's family. My husband, my 2 children, and I live in a storage area. No door, just a curtain at the entrance. Since the storage area itself is divided up into many areas, we use blankets as partitions. I think about our old home often, where I had a room and my children had rooms. Having a room might sound an ordinary privilege to most people, but this war has taught us the precious value of basic necessities. I have no strength left and no patience for the utter lack of privacy. I am just a woman who wants to close a door behind her and a space to be alone to cry in. I want to be me again. Thoughts, Care Bear? I mean, just sucks.
The idea though, and someone in the chat said it. I think it was let me see. I think it was Natalie. No, Jacqueline. Private space should also be a human right, along with food, healthcare, and housing. Like it is truly, like, I could say that for me because I live by myself. It's truly a privilege to be able to do that. But I think, in times when you're stressed and you need to step away, even not for a few moments, it's necessary. So the idea that you cannot do that. But being constantly reminded of the pain, and like you're in a tent, so it's not like
Yeah.
you have a wall to at least kind of muffle the noise. You're hearing everything. So you're constantly bombarded with the noise and probably, depending if it attacks, the screaming and the despair. Like constantly. Like
Yeah.
I can imagine it will drive you nuts. So so mentally, I can't even think about what I would do mentally. Like, even during the pandemic, especially being isolated, even among ourselves, and I think for me, like, was extremely hard for me. Actually, I was sharing with a friend over the weekend, initially during the pandemic, because I don't mind being alone. Like, I'm an introvert. Like, I thought it was the best thing, and then a month or two into it, I realized, no, this is actually the worst thing for me, because I realized I'm more social than I believe myself to be.
Right.
So, but the fact that you are constantly bombarded with noise, even unintentional, and then like having to hear that constantly and not have any solace in that, I can imagine can be a mind trip.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Especially for the length that they've had to deal with it, So, but I mean, people who've lived amongst family members, even for, prolonged periods of time slightly, you could imagine how that goes down. Sometimes you just need breaks. So, but I just thought, we should continue to bring stories from the voices of those people. So, you'll be surprised at how many won't. But yeah, and doing that is most likely why we're demonetized. So you could scan that QR code on your screen, ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, into your URL bar, or, it's always in the description below if you want to give us a few dollary dues to keep us afloat. But we get it. Times are tough. You're probably one of the poors like ourselves. You could just do the algorithm stuff, like and subscribe, sharing the video, and, leaving a comment, letting us know what you think. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Cool. Indy sent me the schedule. Let me grab that. But anyway, how's chat holding up? Hopefully I didn't depress too many people. But yee.
So, Vicky in the chat, I want to know who is ultimately responsible. Is it us or Israel or both?
I think a little column A, a little column B. So
I would argue more so us, because we have the means to stop it. And we're not. So, yes, Israel is at fault as well. But at this point, they need to be almost ordered to stop. And we have the means, given that they need our resource. Well, I say they need our resources like we're producing anything, but they need our money. So, and they need our weapons. So, so while I would argue that Israel is responsible, yeah, absolutely. We are more responsible for prolonging it in ways that we have, at least in more recent history. Like, you can also argue that the British also had their bit to share too at the turn of the century as well. But I would say right now, we are more responsible than Israel.
Well, Jay Quellen in the chat, it's that thing of being packed in like sardines and yet still feeling incredibly isolated and alone. Yep.
Yeah.
Natalie Williams, you could never get away. The horror is ever present. And I think that's like, you can definitely tell when people just have their head in the sand, So,
yeah.
But, yeah, what else we got? So unbelievable, inconceivable, outrageous, and unnecessary, says Natalie Williams. Yep. Jacqueline says private space should be also a human right, along with food, healthcare, and housing. So, but, yep. So, definitely sucks. We've had to cover quite a bit of that, and it definitely puts a toll on us, and we don't even have to deal with it. Funny how that works.
Right.
But, yep, sad. But anyway, we should probably do this. Hold on. Indy's sending me messages. Cool. Let me do this. And then here. So here we are. We got coming up next week. What do we got? AM Wake Ups, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, Independent Review. You know, those are always on our Twitters. You can go check them out. Angel in the Afternoon would be Friday. I do believe 7 p.m. I believe he's still on for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indy will run a clip show of American tradition in case you just need another Jesse fix in your week. And next week, I think we have Indy's going to air a one-on-one on the Independent Review on Saturday. You can also check out Pro Wrestling Talk over on the Ocho. Links in the description. But we'll have Sunday night. We'll have How Do We Miss That? And Boats, if internet actually stays this time for Boats. That would be nice. And then, same stuff the rest of the week. So Independent Review on 9 o'clock. You can go check that out. Plenty of our clips end up there. I think that's pretty much it. Another American Tradition next Thursday. So, Indy saying 7 Seas is Saturday. I do believe I said that. If I remember correctly. But yeah, go check that out. That stuff out. As always, you can always follow us on Twitter. At Get Indie News. And we'll always put out updates for stuff. So, and links to the Substack, indienewsnetwork.com. It's always down in the doobly-doo is another way you can get updates. So we do stuff all week, bro. I can't keep up. We be doing too much work. But anyway, anything else you got, Care Bear?
I do not.
Okay. Well, as always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.